Before the forge, there was a room in Peckham. Before the room in Peckham, there was a woman. Before the woman, there was a young man who did not yet know what he was going to cost her. This is the story of how a place gets built, not with plans and permits and purpose, but with grief and guilt, and the specific decision of a man who looked at what he had been and decided that other men deserved better than what he had offered. The work starts here. It started before the brass plate on the door, before the amber lamp above the entrance, before the first pot of coffee in the copper pot that was not his. It started in a construction yard in Bermondsey in the winter of 1998. Daniel Osei Boateng was 19 years old. He had come from Kumasi with a cousin's address in his pocket and the specific confidence of a young man who has never yet been tested. He had his father's hands, large, built for making things. He had his mother's mind, precise, built for understanding things. What he did not have yet was the thing that would eventually make him dangerous in the best possible way. He did not yet know who he was when nobody was watching. He was about to find out. Not all at once, slowly, the way all important things are found out, through the accumulation of choices made in ordinary moments that turned out not to be ordinary at all. London in 1998 was not the London Daniel had imagined in Kumasi. It was colder, louder, indifferent in the specific way of a city that has seen too many young men arrive with their father's confidence and their mother's precision and find out that neither of those things is enough. Daniel worked construction, 12-hour days, concrete and steel, and the specific satisfaction of a man who builds things with his hands and can see at the end of the day exactly what he made. He shared a room in Peckham with his cousin Emmanuel and Emmanuel's rotating cast of associates, men from Accra and Lagos and Kumasi, who were all doing what Daniel was doing, arriving, working, sending money home, and spending their evenings in the specific way that young men far from home spend their evenings when they have not yet understood what their evenings are for. Daniel spent his evenings the same way, not because he was weak, because he was 20 years old, and nobody had told him yet that there was another way. Nobody had shown him the cost. He would have to see the cost himself. He would have to watch it accumulate in the eyes of someone who could not pretend not to see it. And that someone had not yet arrived in his life. She was training to be a nurse in a hospital in Lewisham. Her name was Grace, and she was the most honest person Daniel had ever met and would ever meet. She was about to walk into his life and show him exactly what he was. Grace Asante had come from Accra. She was 20 years old. She was training to be a nurse because she believed that the most important thing a person could do with their time on earth was reduce the suffering of other people in proximity to them. She was not naive about this. She was clear-eyed about it, in the way of a woman who had chosen a difficult thing with full knowledge of its difficulty and full commitment to its necessity. She could not perform. She could not manage impressions. She was simply always exactly who she was. Daniel met Grace at a gathering in Brixton, not a party, the kind of gathering that happens when people far from home find each other and share food and speak their own languages and remember for an evening that they are not just workers in a foreign city, but people with histories and families and futures. Daniel noticed Grace across the room, not because she was the most beautiful person there, because she was the most present. He introduced himself. She looked at him the way she looked at everything, directly, without calculation, without the performance of interest that most people substitute for actual interest. She was simply there, with him, fully, from the first moment. Daniel had never experienced this before. He did not know how to receive it. He would spend the next 2 years proving this. They were together for almost 2 years, and during those 2 years, Daniel was present the way a man who has never learned to be present is present, physically, functionally, but the real Daniel was somewhere else most evenings. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had not yet been required to be good in the specific way that Grace's presence required. Her honesty demanded a reciprocal honesty that Daniel did not yet know he was capable of. He responded to her realness with performance, her depth with surface, her complete presence with a managed version of himself that was always 3 steps removed from the actual truth of what he was doing and who he was doing it with. Grace saw this. She could not help seeing it. She was constitutionally incapable of not seeing what was in front of her. But she did not confront it immediately. She waited, with the patience of a woman who believed in the possibility of a man she could see more clearly than he could see himself. She waited until she could not wait any more. Then one evening she looked at Daniel across the small kitchen table in his cousin's flat, and she said one sentence that Daniel would carry for the rest of his life, that he would paint in a different form on the wall of a Victorian railway arch in Shoreditch 26 years later. What she said was not cruel, it was simply true. She said she believed he was further along than he was. She was not angry about being wrong. She was simply no longer able to stay. She left. 3 months later, Grace Asante was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Daniel found out through the cousin in Peckham who knew someone who had been at the hospital. He sat with the information for 2 days. Then he went. He did not know if she would see him. She saw him. This is the most important thing about Grace Asante. She did not turn him away. She had every reason to. She chose not to. And so Daniel sat with her. Not every day, some days, the days she would allow. He watched her be honest about dying in the way she had been honest about everything, not performing courage, not performing peace, simply being exactly where she was with exactly what was happening to her. He watched her deteriorate. He watched her hold on. He watched her let go. She died on a Tuesday morning in February. She was 24 years old. Daniel was 23. He took the copper pot from her flat before everything else was collected. He has not explained this to anyone. He will not explain it to anyone. But the pot is there, on the highest shelf of the kitchen at the forge, and every man who receives the coffee from it receives something of grace without knowing it. This is the most important thing in that building, and it is the thing nobody can see.
Daniel stayed in the room in Peckham for 3 weeks after Grace died. He did not leave. He did not eat very much. He did not sleep at regular intervals. He simply stayed in the room and let the full weight of what had happened settle into him, without running from any part of it. He did not run from the grief of losing her. He did not run from the guilt of who he had been during the time they had together. He did not run from the understanding that arrived slowly and completely during those 3 weeks. The understanding that the absence that had cost Grace her time with the real Daniel was not a character flaw. It was the result of never having been required to be present, of having spent every evening of his adult life ensuring that the actual Daniel never had to show up. Because showing up is terrifying and leaking is easy. He understood all of this. He was 23 years old. He had no language for what he was understanding. He had only the understanding itself. And when he finally left the room in Peckham and walked out into the cold London morning of his 24th year, he was carrying something he had not carried when he arrived. Not Grace, she was gone. What he was carrying was the knowledge of what he owed, not to her, to the men who were doing what he had done, who were leaking their power night after night, who were physically present and actually absent from their own lives, who had not yet met the person whose honesty would make the cost of that absence visible. He was going to build something for those men. He did not know yet what it was. He knew it would take time. He knew it would cost him. He did not yet know it would cost him everything he had imagined his life would be. He went back to work. He spent 6 years becoming who he needed to be to build it. Not 6 years of planning, 6 years of the work, the real work, the interior work, the kind that has no audience and produces no content and cannot be performed. He read, not self-help, philosophy, history, the accounts of men who had looked at themselves honestly and written down what they saw. Marcus Aurelius in a tent at the edge of empire, writing to himself in the dark. Epictetus, who had been a slave and understood that the only thing a man can never have taken from him is his own response to what happens to him. He trained. He stopped spending his evenings the way he had spent them before Grace. Not from guilt, from understanding. He understood now what those evenings had cost. He could not afford to spend that way any more. He had something to build. He began to visit men, men he respected, men who were serious, men who were doing genuine internal work and doing it alone, men who were isolated not because they lacked company, but because they lacked the specific kind of community that forms between men who are witnessing each other's genuine struggle. He told them what he was thinking of building. He did not have a name for it yet. He described it as a place where men who were serious about the work could find each other, where what was carried could be held by more than one pair of hands, where the truth could be said without performance and received without judgment. The men he told this to did not laugh. They looked at him the way men look at something they had been waiting for without knowing they were waiting. He was 29 years old. He found the railway arch in Shoreditch. He signed the lease. He carried in the furniture himself.
On the first night, Daniel came alone. He had told no one the opening date. He had bought 8 chairs and arranged them around a large wooden table. He had placed one chair at the head of the table. He sat in it, just once, just that night. For 20 minutes he sat in the chair that would become the empty chair, and he was alone in the space he had built, and he let the silence of it settle into him. He was not celebrating. He was not performing the emotion of a man completing something. He was simply present in the thing he had made. The way his father used to sit in the workshop in Kumasi after the last piece of furniture was done and before the next one was started, simply in the space between. Then he stood up. He walked to the entrance corridor. He took a brush and a pot of black paint, and he painted 7 words directly onto the brick. He thought about them for a long time before he painted them. Then he painted them. He put the brush down. He walked to the kitchen. He made the first coffee, not in the stovetop espresso maker, in the copper pot, Grace's copper pot. He poured it into one of the mismatched mugs. He sat at the table, not at the head, at the side, among the chairs that were waiting for the men who would eventually sit in them. He drank his coffee. He waited. Nobody came that night. Nobody knew to come. He came back the next morning, and the morning after that. He told the first man. That man told the next. The forge has been open every day since. The chair at the head of the table has been empty every day since. The copper pot has been on the highest shelf every day since. The words on the wall have been read by every man who has ever walked through that corridor every day since. And Daniel has been there every day, before anyone else arrives, after everyone else leaves, reading the words he painted on his first night, asking himself the same question he asked himself before he painted them, not whether the work is worth it. He knows the answer to that. The question Daniel asks himself is the one Grace's sentence planted in him 24 years ago. The question of whether he is as far along as he believes he is, whether the man he built after Grace is the man Grace believed he could become, whether the work he does for other men is also finally the work he is doing for himself. He does not always know the answer. On the good days, he believes it is yes. On the other days, he makes the coffee.
He opens the door. He sits among the men, and he does what he has done every day for 11 years. He stays. The work starts here. It started with grief. It was built with the carpenter's hands of a man who learned too late what presence costs, and decided to spend the rest of his life making that cost visible to other men before it became irreversible. That is the forge. That is Daniel. That is the work. And it starts here. Every morning, every Thursday gathering, every copper pot coffee made for a man who has finally arrived or who is finally leaving. Every question asked that opens everything. Every silence held without flinching. Every empty chair at the head of a table full of men who are doing the hardest thing, being present in their own lives, without performance, without running, the way Grace was present until the very last morning of her life, the way Daniel has been present every morning since. The war starts within, and Daniel started his 24 years ago in a room in Peckham. He has never stopped.